Drug cartels in the Americas have become a global threat, controlling smuggling routes from Mexico to Colombia, fueling violence and corruption. U.S. anti-drug operations frequently clash with these criminal organizations, but in 2025, a massive U.S. Marines raid changed the game, putting the cartels on the run. Below is the account of this war, from a covert operation to an outcome that shocked the world. On a moonless night in 2025, the U.S. Marines launched the largest raid in history, with thousands of elite troops storming cartel strongholds in Mexico, Colombia, and Honduras simultaneously. C-130 transport planes dropped paratroopers into dense jungles, while fast amphibious ships hit the coasts. Caught off guard by the scale of the attack, cartels scrambled to activate defenses, but U.S. drones obliterated guard posts with guided missiles. A massive explosion rocked a cocaine factory in Tijuana, black smoke blotting out the sky. Marines charged in, engaging in ferocious firefights, with heavily armed cartel gunmen, turning neighborhoods into blood-soaked battlefields. The cartels had no time to flee, and the hunt was on. The cartels struck back, using tunnel networks and armored vehicles to resist. In Mexico City, a cartel convoy slammed into a U.S. Marine outpost, a car bomb detonating with a blast that shook the city. The Marines countered with lightning ambushes, using Black Hawk helicopters to hunt fleeing kingpins. A highway battle in Colombia turned into hell, with cartel anti-tank missiles downing a U.S. helicopter, but Marines quickly encircled, wiping out hundreds of gunmen. Smoke and flames spread, jungles burning as cartels torched evidence to cover their tracks. The pursuit grew frenzied, with cartels using narco-submarines to escape, only to be intercepted by U.S. warships, turning the ocean into a war zone. The conflict spilled into cyberspace as cartels hired hackers to attack Marine command systems, disrupting communications and exposing troop positions. The U.S. retaliated by destroying cartel servers in Panama, using viruses to seize hidden bank accounts. In the skies, cartel drones struck U.S. bases in Texas, but American air defenses shot them down in a rain of fire. The war expanded as U.S. allies in South America joined, surrounding cartel hideouts in Brazil. Explosions and black smoke choked the skies, with nighttime battles turning cities into infernos, where gunfire and screams never ceased. The cartels called in reinforcements from international crime syndicates, leading to attacks on U.S. infrastructure in Latin America. A massive explosion destroyed an oil pipeline in Venezuela, sparking widespread fires. The Marines responded with rapid raids on cartel training camps in Honduras, using guided missiles to eliminate targets from afar. The war spread to border regions, with fierce battles in Mexico shaking frontier cities. The regional economy reeled as smuggling routes collapsed, and aerial imagery showed vast areas engulfed in flames and smoke. In a desperate move, cartels deployed chemical weapons, but Marines in protective gear swiftly neutralized the threat, turning the conflict into a living nightmare. The raid's fallout triggered a global crime crisis as cartels retaliated by sabotaging shipping routes, causing shortages of drugs and goods in Europe and the U.S. Nations scrambled to cooperate in rebuilding, with international task forces hunting remaining kingpins. Autonomous robots were deployed to clean up chemically contaminated zones, while relief ships delivered supplies to affected communities. The U.S. and surviving cartels, facing massive losses, paused hostilities to recover. But the region remained littered with wreckage, with new criminal groups rising from the ashes. The crisis temporarily halted the war, but emerging tensions and persistent crime threats signaled a chaotic future. Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea has long been a flashpoint, where U.S. freedom of navigation operations clash with China's aggressive sovereignty claims. Confrontations involving Chinese warships and aircraft have pushed tensions to the edge. In 2025, a daring Chinese provocation at Scarborough using submarines and attack drones ignited a ferocious conflict with the U.S. Navy, triggering a cascade of events that stunned the world. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a reckless maritime act to a shocking global outcome. On a stormy night in 2025, the waters around Scarborough Shoal churned with danger. A Chinese Type 095 stealth submarine carrying underwater drones surfaced abruptly near the USS Preble, a U.S. destroyer conducting a freedom of navigation patrol. The submarine broadcast warnings, demanding the U.S. ship leave what China claimed as territorial waters. The USS Preble held its course, radar sweeping relentlessly, the atmosphere electric. Suddenly, a Chinese underwater drone surged forward, colliding with the Preble's hull, shaking the deck and causing minor damage. Alarms screamed, searchlights pierced the pitch-black sea, and Scarborough became a tinderbox ready to explode. The collision ignited an immediate response. The Chinese submarine unleashed a swarm of attack drones, targeting the USS Preble's sonar systems and disrupting its navigation. The U.S. Navy countered, deploying anti-submarine helicopters from the ship that obliterated the drones with missiles. A Chinese destroyer emerged from the darkness, firing flares and water cannons, attempting to force the Preble out. The U.S. scrambled F-35 jets from a nearby carrier, and a dogfight erupted over Scarborough's skies. Missiles tore through the air, a Chinese drone exploding above the sea, sending a towering geyser skyward. Black smoke and flames engulfed the area, transforming the waters into a chaotic battlefield where every second teetered on the brink of catastrophe. The conflict surged into cyberspace and outer space with breakneck speed. Chinese hackers attacked the USS Preble's control systems, severing communications with the U.S. fleet. The U.S. retaliated, crippling radar stations on China's artificial islands in the South China Sea. In orbit, Chinese military satellites unleashed jamming signals, disrupting U.S. Navy navigation systems. U.S. satellites struck back, neutralizing a Chinese satellite with an electromagnetic pulse. In the skies, fighters from both sides clashed fiercely, hypersonic missiles lighting up the night. The Preble's Aegis defense system intercepted most incoming fire, but debris rained into the sea like a meteor shower, pushing Scarborough to the edge of all-out war. The conflict erupted when China launched ballistic missiles from the mainland, targeting U.S. naval bases in Guam and the Philippines. The U.S. responded with a lightning strike, using cruise missiles from submarines to demolish Chinese military facilities on Hainan Island. Flames and smoke billowed from the ruined bases, shaking the regional balance of power. China's allies deployed warships to the South China Sea, while NATO mobilized fleets from Japan. Global maritime trade ground to a halt, crippling economies. Satellite imagery revealed massive fires and smoke clouds, marking a brutal, unprecedented phase of warfare. The fallout from the conflict triggered a global financial collapse. Cyber attacks crashed stock markets in New York, Shanghai, and London as AI viruses paralyzed trading systems. International banks froze assets, sparking worldwide panic. Nations reliant on South China Sea trade scrambled for emergency negotiations to reopen shipping lanes. Autonomous robots were deployed to restore wrecked data centers, while international relief ships delivered goods to affected ports. The U.S. and China, facing catastrophic economic losses, paused military actions to stabilize markets. Yet Scarborough's waters remained littered with wreckage, and cybercriminal networks rose amid the chaos. The crisis temporarily halted the war, but financial instability and emerging threats signaled a turbulent future. Tensions between the U.S. and China in the South China Sea have persisted through years of maritime and aerial confrontations. U.S. freedom of navigation operations often spark disputes, while China counters with aggressive tactics like deploying fighter jets and naval vessels in close proximity. An intercept of a U.S. warship by a heavily armed Chinese fighter jet in 2025 pushed the region to the brink, triggering a chain of events that shook the global order. Below is the account of this conflict, from an aerial intercept to its far-reaching global consequences. On an August morning in 2025, over the South China Sea near Scarborough Shoal, a Chinese J-20 fighter jet loaded with anti-ship missiles closed in on the USS Dewey, an Arleigh Burke-class U.S. destroyer equipped with advanced radar and guided missiles. The Dewey was conducting a freedom of navigation operation to assert international rights in the disputed region. The J-20 broadcast warnings, demanding the U.S. ship depart, echoing Beijing's sovereignty claims. But the USS Dewey held its course, radar locked on target, the atmosphere charged. Suddenly, the J-20 swooped low, mere hundreds of meters from the ship, rattling its deck. The waters around Scarborough Shoal became a powder keg, ready to ignite.
The intercept turned aggressive as the J-20 dropped flares near the USS Dewey, disrupting the ship's radar systems. A miscalculation led to a dangerous act. The J-20 fired a warning missile that skimmed past the ship, triggering a small explosion on the water's surface. Alarms blared on the Dewey, smoke rising from the waves. The U.S. ship activated its close-in defense systems, shooting down an anti-ship drone launched by China in response. Nearby Chinese naval vessels moved to encircle the Dewey, while the U.S. deployed F-35 jets from a carrier in the South China Sea. Missiles streaked across the sky, transforming the Scarborough Shoal area into a blazing battlefield, with black smoke and explosions spreading wide.
The conflict spilled into cyberspace and outer space. Viruses targeted the USS Dewey's control systems, disrupting communication with the U.S. fleet. The U.S. countered by crippling radar at Chinese bases on artificial islands in the South China Sea. In space, Chinese and U.S. military satellites clashed in digital attacks, disrupting global positioning systems. Fighter jets from both sides battled over the South China Sea, with hypersonic missiles slicing through clouds. The Dewey's Aegis defense system intercepted most Chinese missiles, but debris from the explosions rained into the sea. The war expanded as U.S. allies joined with patrol boats, turning Scarborough Shoal into a multinational flashpoint, where sky and sea. The conflict escalated beyond control when China launched a massive cyber attack, paralyzing financial systems and power grids in major U.S. cities. The U.S. retaliated by destroying Chinese cyber command centers in Shanghai and Guangzhou using advanced AI viruses. These attacks disrupted global supply chains, causing panic in commercial hubs. U.S. naval bases in the Pacific faced Chinese ballistic missile strikes, while the U.S. deployed additional carriers to the South China Sea. The global economy reeled as maritime trade routes stalled, and satellite imagery showed cities plunged into darkness, marking an unprecedented phase of warfare. The aftermath of the cyber attacks triggered a global trade crisis. Disrupted supply chains paralyzed major ports, from Shanghai to Los Angeles, leading to shortages of goods and raw materials. Nations reliant on trade scrambled to negotiate emergency alliances to restore shipping. Autonomous robot teams were deployed to repair cyber infrastructure, while international relief ships delivered essential goods to affected regions. The U.S. and China, recognizing the cost of the conflict, paused military actions to focus on economic recovery. But the battlefield remained littered with wreckage, with cybercriminal groups exploiting the chaos to rise. The crisis temporarily curbed the war, but new tensions and lingering trade threats signaled an unstable future.